Hey guys, and welcome to the first video of our pre-calc class. Today we're looking at P.1, which is about the real numbers. And since you've been using the real numbers your whole life, you probably already know all the properties that are listed in the section, but there is one thing I wanted to take a look at, and we'll do a couple examples, and that's the order of operations. I'm going to make a couple changes from the way that you probably first learned the order of operations. So here I have written is probably the way you first learned it, which is PEMDAS, which says you just do these in order. So you do parentheses, then exponents, then you multiply, then divide, and then you add and subtract. So the first thing we're going to change a little bit from the way it's written here. Instead of thinking it's going from top to bottom, I'm going to add these two extra groupings. And for multiply and divide, we're not going to go top to bottom. We're not going to multiply everything and then divide everything and then go on to the red section. We're going to multiply and divide together, but we're just going to do it left to right. So in this example, if you would just do things top to bottom, you would do parentheses and exponents where there's none here, but you would multiply 3 times 4, and then you would divide 2 divided by 12, which was that answer there. Alright, but we're actually going to do, in our order of operations, do multiply and divide together, but we're going to do them left to right. So we're going to do 2 divided by 3 first, and then multiply that result by 4. And same goes for add and subtract. If this was 2 minus 3 plus 4, if you would just go top to bottom, you would add 3 and 4 first, and then 2 minus that result. But we're actually going to do add and subtract at the same time, and then do 2 minus 3, take that result, and then add 4 to it. So those are the first changes we have to make to how I had it written originally. And the other big change we're going to have is we're going to cross out this top. Alright, we're no longer going to have the P parentheses. We're now going to have a G. Alright, so it's GEMDAS now, which doesn't really flow as well, but and the G is going to stand for grouping. Alright, so we're not going to think parentheses is a grouping, but there's other types of grouping that we might have to look out for. So again, now these are going to be parentheses, which is what we had before, because when you first learned this, that's the really only types of grouping you had. You also might have square brackets. Alright, sometimes we put square brackets around things that have parentheses inside of it. Alright, you also might have absolute values. Alright, that's another type of grouping. The other one you'll see a lot is fraction. So dividing is actually correlated to this, but when you have a lot of stuff up here and a lot of stuff down here, this division is actually going to act as a grouping, and we'll do stuff to the numerator, then stuff to the denominator, and then we'll do our division. Alright, so let's do a couple examples and see how this new order of operations works. Alright, so now let's look at these two examples. So I replaced the P over here with the G, and now we're going to look at this first example. So the first thing we have to do is look for any grouping. So we have parentheses and absolute values, and they're not contained in each other. They're each separate, so we can do these two things at the same time. So the first thing we're going to do is inside of this parentheses, we have a negative 8 times 3, so we have no exponents. So now we move on to the blue, which is multiply and divide left to right. Well, we just have one multiplication, so we're going to leave that, and negative 8 times 3 is negative 24. Alright, we haven't got to subtraction yet, so that's still the same. And now in the second group, we have absolute values. Same thing, we don't have exponents. We have multiply and divide left to right. Negative 3 times 7 is negative 21. Alright, so now we have this phrase here. Alright, negative 24, it's in a grouping, but we don't actually need it because it's the very first term and it's all by itself. Alright, we still have this minus. Alright, now in the second grouping, we still need to do something, because inside of absolute value, it's actually going to change this minus 21. And now instead of a minus 21, the absolute value gets rid of the negative, and we just have 21. Alright, and you don't have to write it in parentheses like I did. It's just to say this turned into that. Alright, now the very last thing we have to do, now we have no multiplication and division, so now we're all the way down these first 4 steps, and we're on to the red section, add and subtract. So we're just going to add and subtract left to right. Well, minus 24 minus 21 gives us a negative 45. Alright, so here, since these groupings aren't containing each other, we just do each one separately. Alright, don't forget the absolute value gets rid of this negative sign, so we have negative 24 minus 21 gives us our final answer. Alright, and now if we look at this example on the right, just like I said that division can be a grouping, here we have some complicated stuff in the numerator and some complicated stuff in the denominator. So we're going to leave this division for now, and we're going to simplify each one. Alright, so now just worry about the numerator for now. Grouping, we don't have any. We have parentheses, but there's nothing happening on the inside. Alright, exponents we don't have. Alright, now we're into multiply and divide. We don't have any multiplication at first, but really this negative here is being multiplied into this negative 6. So we have a negative 2 times a negative times negative 6, which is going to give us a negative 2. Negative times a negative gives a positive, and we have plus 6. Alright, so our numerator becomes that, and the same idea in the denominator. We have this negative here that's going to be multiplying in to this negative 9, and we'll get negative 5 plus 9. And we still have complicated stuff in the numerator and denominator. Idea is we don't want to actually divide stuff until we just have a number at the top and the number at the bottom. So we still have addition, so we want to try to simplify more. Here we're going to go onto the red section, so we're going to add and subtract left to right. Well, negative 2 plus 6 is 4. Negative 5 plus 9 is also 4. Alright, and now that we just have a number on the top and a number on the bottom, we are actually dividing now. And of course 4 over 4 gives us 1. So the main idea with this division, don't do this step until you have just one number over another number. Here we started with two complicated things, so simplify each of these using your order of operations. We got down to here, and then do the division right here. Alright, so now we're going to look at some examples that have variables instead of just numbers. So now we're going to be looking at something that's much more common through the rest of the course. We're going to have variables intertwined with our numbers, and we're also going to use order of operations on these in order to simplify these type of expressions. So the first thing, we want to simplify this expression here. So the first thing we'll look at is grouping, but inside this group we have 4 minus 2x, and here we have x minus 5. Since this term here has a variable and this term doesn't, we can't combine them at all. Alright, so when we say combining like terms, we want to make sure that they have the same number of variables. So here we have an x, here we don't, so we can't combine these. So we can't actually do step 1 at all, grouping, alright, because in here we can't subtract. So we go into exponents and no exponents, but now we're going to multiply and divide left to right. So the first multiplication we have is right here. Alright, so this 5 is going to distribute into both of these. Alright, so the 5 times the 4 gives us 20. Alright, and the 5 times the negative 2x gives us a negative 10x. Alright. And now we're going to keep going left to right since we're here. We don't do subtraction yet, but we also have multiplication here. We have this negative 2. Alright, you can think about it as just 2. Alright, being multiplied as x minus 5, so it's going to distribute into here. So this negative 2 times x is a negative 2x, and this negative 2 times negative 5 gives us a positive 10. Alright, so we did this blue step here, we did all multiplication and division. Alright, now we want to combine like terms. So just like I said, we couldn't combine these because they don't have the same variable. Here, we do want to combine all the things that have the same variables. Here we have an x, and here we have an x, so we should be able to combine these. Here there's no x, and here there's no x, so we should be able to combine these. So I'm going to do a middle step that you don't really have to do, but just see what's happening. So instead of writing this as negative 10x, we write it as 20 plus negative 10x, and instead of minus 2x, I'm going to write it as plus negative 2x. Alright, so these two things I wrote are the same as subtracting 10x and subtracting 2x. Of course, we still have this plus 10. But now that I have everything written in terms of addition, so 20 plus that, plus that, plus that, addition is commutative, so I can move things around all I want since there's only addition here. So I'm going to move this 20 back here. Alright, now I have negative 10x plus negative 2x plus 20 plus 10. Alright, now I have all my like terms together, so I'm going to combine them. Here I have a negative 10x and a negative 2x. Those are going to combine to give me a negative 12x. Alright, I can only combine those together, and I can only combine these together to give me 30. Alright, so this original expression up here is going to simplify down to negative 12x plus 30. So we do our distribution first. Alright, then we move our things to get like terms. You could probably just go from this step here down to the final answer. If you see this negative 10x and negative 2x gives you a negative 12, and the positive 20, and the positive 10 gives you 30. Alright, so these middle steps are just to see what's happening in terms of our rules, but you can't just go straight from this step to that step. Alright. Now something that's really important for the course is finding the value of a variable expression or an algebraic expression with actual value. So we start with this expression here, b squared minus 4ac. This will come up again later. Alright, but we want to know what the value of this expression is when our variables have these values here. Alright, so we're going to start off with what we have, b squared minus 4ac. Alright, and now we want a to be 1. So if a equals 1, we can use the substitution property and just replace our a with a 1. So we have b squared, we don't replace that yet. Alright, 4, but now instead of writing an a, instead of 4 times a, I'm going to replace it with the value that I want, and I still have times c. Alright, I'm just going to keep going down. Now b equals 4, so I can substitute the 4 in for every b in this expression. So instead of b squared, I'm going to have 4 squared, alright, minus 4 times 1 times c. And then lastly, I'm going to replace c is equal to negative 2, so I'm going to substitute negative 2 in. Now we have 4 times 1 times, and instead of c, I'm going to use the negative 2. Alright, so now this expression here is just like the examples that we did earlier. It's just an order of operations. So we're going to do this is no groupings. Alright, there's parentheses, but they're not actually grouping anything together. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is exponents. So we have 4 squared, which is going to give 16. Alright, minus 4 times 1 times negative 2. Alright, so now we're past this section here. We're on to multiply and divide left to right. So 16 minus, we don't use that yet, but we have 4 times 1 was 4. Alright, so we did that step, and we keep going left to right. Now we have 4 times negative 2. So this negative 4 times this negative 2 will give us a positive 8. And now we do our last step, which is adding and subtracting left to right. So we just add these two and get 24. Alright, so order of operations, it is pretty much the same as you learned it the first time. Alright, the only difference is that our grouping, we now have to worry about brackets, absolute values, and division. Alright, if there's more complicated things than just a over b. Alright, and the other thing is just make sure you don't multiply everything first and then divide. We do multiply and divide together from left to right. Alright, and adding and subtracting, same thing. We do adding and subtracting together. We just do them from left to right. Alright, so this will be important, plugging in values and making sure you use order of operations to get out the correct value. Those will be important for the whole semester, so make sure you can do this and do examples if you still have questions.